We're back here, whole 9 yards, Thursday afternoon. Brandon, how's it going?
It's good. Yeah, everything's good. How about you?
Pretty good. Obviously, you guys can see we're not in the podcast studio today. Some stuff went on or whatever, so we're just gonna go from Zoom today. But what were your initial reactions to the Elite Eight?
Yeah, there was pretty good games. I'd say. I'd say the only, I guess, not interesting game was the Gonzaga USC game, which I thought could be somewhat competitive. I thought USC was maybe the most likely to win out of all. I guess the team that they were playing, they weren't as likely to win, but I thought their team as a whole was probably better than every other team that wasn't favored, is what I'm trying to say, during the Elite Eight. So I thought that game would be a little more competitive. It was basically a blowout the entire game. But obviously, you had the really good matchup with the UCLA Michigan, with Michigan going down, which I'm sure we'll start with that game. But even the Houston Oregon State game, it was close. It wasn't it wasn't like down to the wire close, but it was definitely close throughout the entire game. And then you had the Arkansas Baylor game, which again was kind of the same. It wasn't completely down to the wire, but it was somewhat close enough to where it's at least competitive. So I thought there were some pretty good games, but obviously the Michigan UCLA game was the best one.
Yeah, to me, I mean, the Elite Eight showed to me that, like most people have thought, basically throughout all of March Madness and all of college basketball this season, Gonzaga and Baylor are just the two best teams in college basketball. I thought, although Baylor Arkansas was pretty competitive, Arkansas is still a pretty solid team. I mean, they're a three seed for a reason, even though they only beat Oral Roberts by 2 points. I mean, Oral Roberts also beat Ohio State, which was a team that many experts had going into the Final Four, if not the championship game. They handled Arkansas pretty well, and it was pretty close, but Baylor was clearly the better team in that game. And then Gonzaga, I mean, they destroyed USC, which is not something I was expecting, really. I mean, I thought USC was, yeah, like you said, they're probably the best underdog team out of all the four games. And to me, they were at least the fifth best team out of the Elite Eight. Probably, to me, I would have probably had them as my third best team, and I don't think that's true anymore. I mean, I think Houston's probably better. I think Arkansas probably proved they were better, but yeah, I mean, I definitely thought USC would have had a better showing against Gonzaga. And to me, now after the Elite Eight, now I can basically just, at least I think that Gonzaga is probably by far the best team, and that if honestly, if they lose in the Final Four championship, I'm going to be pretty surprised, especially in the Final Four. If UCLA managed to beat Gonzaga, I would be shocked because I don't even know if UCLA is better than USC. I'm not. I think that honestly, if Michigan or UCLA played Gonzaga, and UCLA is going to, I'm not sure if either of them are going to put up that great of a match. I think Gonzaga will probably handle them pretty well. I mean, Gonzaga basically hasn't had a competitive game yet in March in the whole bracket.
Yeah,
That is more than any team can say.
yeah, I was about to say their hardest game was the USC game, and they won by 20. And for the Final Four, they faced UCLA, which I mean they've been hot, but I'd so much rather face UCLA than they possibly could have faced Michigan. They could have faced Florida State. I know Texas lost, early in the tournament. They could have faced Texas. So there's teams that they would have possibly had to face in this round that they just don't have to, and they have to play a UCLA team that was in the first four to make the tournament. So they just barely made the tournament, and they've gone on this run, which you can't blame them for. So even though Gonzaga is obviously going to be favored, I'm pretty confident they're going to win this game, but you don't really know because I think even though Michigan obviously didn't have their best player, they were still the better team comparing UCLA and Michigan, and they really struggled that entire game. They only scored 49 points. Obviously, it came down to the end on the final shot. They had some bad possessions down the stretch, but they got outplayed in that game. So I think this Gonzaga team I think they're two steps above Michigan. So I think that makes a difference in how UCLA can play them. But I think Michigan was just an easier opponent than Gonzaga is going to be. But it could be a close game. I could see this game being a 20-point blowout, or it could be right down to the wire, which I know you could say about most games, but I think that stands true for this game. That's just what it seems like it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting to see a game where Gonzaga actually looks somewhat vulnerable. Maybe this is the game, maybe it's not. I mean, it's like clearly. I mean, all these series, if you want to call it that, they're all one game, so like anything can really happen. But I would be very surprised to see Gonzaga lose to UCLA, and I mean, yeah, they've just looked so good. And on the other side of the bracket, I mean, Baylor and Houston. I think Baylor is, I mean, they have probably looked like the second best team so far in college basketball. And Houston, although they've had some scary games, especially against Rutgers, where they probably should have lost, they've looked like a great team as well. I mean, they've looked like a great team. They got to the Final Four. Uh, so yeah, I mean, if you made me pick right now, I mean, I'm picking Gonzaga and I'm picking Baylor, and I know that's the boring pick because they're both going to be the favored teams, but in my opinion, it's just clear that they've looked like the two best teams, or at least left in the Final Four, if not in all of the bracket. So it's hard for me not to pick those two teams. So that's what I would go with.
Yeah, and before the bracket started, I had Gonzaga versus Baylor in my final. I had Gonzaga winning, so I mean, I'm obviously going to stay with that. Even if the matchups are different or whatever, I'd probably still go with that. I mean, the obviously we talked about the Gonzaga one, but the Baylor one, I mean, Houston, yeah, they probably should have lost that Rutgers game, to be honest. But they did win. They had some good wins past that these last two games, but I don't think they're on the level that Baylor is. I think it's Gonzaga clearly at the top, then it's Baylor a step below them, and then every other team is at least one or two steps below those teams. So it's the two best teams are Gonzaga and Baylor. So I'm just waiting for those teams to win, and then I think it'll be a really good final between Gonzaga and Baylor.
I'm in the same boat for sure. But as far as other things that are coming up in the next few days, MLB opening day is
Today,
tomorrow. Today,
today,
I think the Red Sox play today. I
today,
could be wrong.
Thursday. Well, their game got postponed, but yes,
Okay.
but we're supposed to play today.
Yeah, but anyways, opening day is today, so we're gonna go ahead with a few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago or something, maybe even more than that. We did a an over under on teams winning seasons. It's like how many wins they'd have today. We're with opening day today. We're just gonna go ahead and yeah, we're going to do some award predictions. So we're just gonna do both AL and NL. We're gonna do we're gonna do MVP, we're gonna do rookie of the year, we're gonna do manager of the year, and we're gonna do Cy Young.
Yep.
We'll do that for AL and NL. So I guess we'll just start off in the AL. We'll go MVP. I'll I guess I'll take the first one here. To me, I don't know if he actually ends up winning it, but it's the safest bet by far. I mean, I have to go with Trout. I mean, he's consistently been the best player in baseball. There's not a single year you can point to and say that he wasn't a top, probably three player in the league. If not, probably the best. He's basically the LeBron of baseball, minus the fact that he just doesn't win because baseball's just a different sport, obviously. Um, he's the best player. It's tough for me to go with anybody else, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go with someone different, whether it be LeMahieu, Bregman, Judge, anyone else. But it's kind of hard to pick anyone else but Trout. I mean, he's finished top five in MVP in every single year he's been in the league. So it's just tough not to choose him. He's like you said, he's the safest pick. If you're going to pick someone for MVP, you know he's going to finish at least in the top five. But it's I I know I like LeMahieu. I'd like to go with, but just the last 2 years that he's had, they've been amazing seasons, and I just don't. I mean, I think he'll have a really good season. I just don't know if he'll be as good as he was those last two seasons, where he was basically historic in his numbers. And then if you really look at the other people in the AL, it's just hard to pick someone to be MVP. There's not a lot of great candidates past Trout. So I think he has to be the number one option, obviously based on what he's done. But I think for this
Yeah.
season that stands true.
If you're not picking Trout, you're taking a gamble. Like you could pick Otani, but again, that's a huge gamble. You could
Yeah.
go with somebody like Judge. That's a huge gamble. He has to stay healthy. You could go with like maybe even a pitcher if you want to, but that's a huge gamble, obviously.
And I
You're
wanted
gambling.
Well, I was gonna say I wanted to go with Rendon, but he's on the same team as Trout, so it's just like Trout's most likely gonna have the better numbers, so it's just hard to go with someone even on the same team. Because I do think Rendon's probably a pretty good candidate, but he's just on the same team. So
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think, yeah, it's just going to be tough for Trout to not win it if he plays at all like he has.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, that's probably out of all the awards, that's probably the easiest bet. Um, AL Cy Young we'll go with next. I'll let you take the first one on that.
yeah. For Cy Young, I'm gonna go with Lucas Giolito from the White Sox. I would say Garrett Cole's probably the favorite. I would say right now. I know he's pitching today. I know he's given up 2 runs, but obviously it's only one start. I think Giolito. 2019 he was really good. He kind of like flaked out at the end. right at the end of the season, but he was in the Cy Young conversation basically the entire year. Last year, he was also really good. So I think this year, with a team that's better, obviously the White Sox made the playoffs last year, but they're even better this year than they were last year. They have a couple more arms in the rotation, a better bullpen. So I think their overall team's gotten better. So I think that could lead. And I know wins doesn't really matter as much anymore in the Cy Young, but I think it matters somewhat if you win 20 games and your ERA is, under 3. I think that does matter. So I think based on the team getting better, which could lead to more wins, and then also just him just becoming a better pitcher throughout this entire season. So I'd go with Giolito, even though he may not be the favorite.
Yeah, to me, it's tough to go with anybody with other than Garrett Cole, so I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna go with Cole. I know I'm picking two favorites, but I mean, I expect the Yankees to probably be one of the best, if not probably the best team in the AL. Their expectations are it's World Series championship or bust for the Yankees this year for sure. And if they're going to do that, Cole's going to have at least a Cy Young caliber year. And if he has that, I expect him to probably win the Cy Young. So I'll go with Cole there. Rookie of the year. I'll let you go first on here.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with Randy Arozarena. Obviously, he was the MVP of the playoffs last season, and he still technically is a rookie because he really didn't even play in the regular season last season, so he's still a rookie this year. So I'm gonna go with him. I think he may be the favorite, obviously based on his performance from last year's playoffs, but it's in the American League. It's just kind of tough with the names that are there. There's a lot of guys who seem like they may start the season on the main roster. They may come in maybe a month or two in, and you just don't know how they're going to perform. So I'm kind of going off experience from last season. So I'm like I would probably want to go with someone else, but based on what he did last season, if he's just anywhere close to that, he's obviously not going to repeat that. If he's just somewhat close to that, I think he'll have a pretty good shot at winning AL Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'm going with Rosenary as well. I mean, it's just tough to go with anybody else. I believe he is the favorite. I think Andrew Vaughn might be a favorite as well from the White Sox. I mean, I'm not exact. I just haven't done too much research on who's going to be AL Rookie of the Year. I think Rosenary is the one that pretty much the only guy that comes to mind for me. I think there's a couple others that might be favored right now, but he's definitely the favorite. I'll go with him. I think it's the most unpredictable award just because, I mean, rookies are typically going to be more unpredictable than
Yeah.
a Cy Young Award winner or an MVP. So it's the one that it's toughest, but yeah, I mean, I'll go with Rosenary. Manager of the year. This is a tough pick. I guess I'll go first. I guess I'm going to go with Aaron Boone. And there's others that I would want to go with. I think there's a solid amount of candidates here, but I'll go with Boone because I think he's maybe the safest pick, just because the Yankees, I expect them to have probably the best record in the AL. If they don't, it's probably because they just are in a tougher division than others. I think they're the best team. I don't know that. I mean, I don't think Boone's the best manager in the AL. I think there's probably other candidates that are better, like pure managers, if you want to go just by that. But I think his team's the most talented. They're in New York, so they're going to have the biggest spotlight by far out of any other team, other than at least in the AL for sure. So I'll go with Boone, maybe like a Joe Madden or a La Russa or the guy from the Blue Jays, like Montoyo, or
Yeah.
maybe like a Dusty Baker, Kevin Cash. Maybe they take it, but I'll go with Boone.
Yeah, so I was between Tony La Russa and Charlie Montoya, who's the manager for the Blue Jays. I'm going to go with Charlie Montoya because I think the division matters in that you have the Yankees, who are the clear favorites in that division. You have the Rays, who just made the World Series last season. And then the Red Sox and the Orioles obviously aren't as good, but the Red Sox can be somewhat competitive. But I think the Blue Jays, they made the playoffs last season, but that was because of like the expanded playoffs. But I think this year I think they'll be better than the Rays. And I think that's what when we did our over under for wins, I think I had the Blue Jays over the Rays. So I'm going to go with Montoyo because I just think that this team is I think they're probably a 90-win team, honestly. I think they can get there. And even though I think the White Sox are probably the second best team in the American League, I think their division is just so easy. I know they have the Twins, but it's really just them two, and the Twins are probably a step below the White Sox. So I'm going to go with Charlie Montoyo for Manager of the Year.
Looking at the NL, we'll just go straight into the NL MVP. I'll let you go first. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so I mean, I said this when we did our over unders. Juan Soto, he's my clear MVP in the National League. He probably would have been the MVP last year in the 60 game season if he didn't miss the first like 10 games or whatever it was for COVID. So he just didn't have enough games to play. But uh, this year, I think he's just going to be an absolute monster. I mean, he can easily hit over 300. He could hit 30 homers, drive in 100 runs. He has a great walk rate. He gets on base a ton. His defense is, it's all right, but that doesn't really matter for MVP that much. So I think he's one of the best players in baseball. He's only 21, 22 years old.
22.
So 22 exactly. It was, I guess, if I had to choose a second candidate, it'd probably be Acuna, but I just think him offensively is just completely, he's unfair, honestly, at the plate. Where Acuna, he does have some struggles, at least at the plate. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Juan Soto for MVP.
Yeah, to me, this is actually a much more interesting award by far than AL MVP. To me, you could give it to Soto, you could give it to Betts, you could give it to Acuna, Tatis Jr., maybe even like Lindor. I mean, he just signed the big extension. There's a bunch of sleeper picks. You could sleeper pick Arenado, Harper, Yelich. You could go with the best pitcher in the game, DeGrom. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna go Soto as well. He's definitely the favorite to win it, like you said. I'm also probably biased as well. He is probably the best young hitter in the game. If not, yeah, like he's might just be the best hitter in the game. Uh, I think Betts is probably the second favorite to win this. I wouldn't mind if Betts won it either. I mean, I'm definitely rooting for Soto to win the MVP. Um, if Betts won it though, I would be kind of happy because I think it just sets him up to choke in the playoffs. I mean, to me, I mean, this is irrelevant. This is like kind of off topic, but I mean, I don't even think Betts had like that great of a postseason. But and I mean, Betts as far as before last season, he's only choked in the playoffs. So I mean, it's completely irrelevant. But that would kind of set up that narrative if Betts were to win the MVP to see how he does in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go with Soto. I think the narrative lines up. If he hits like he did last season, yes, you probably win the MVP. So yeah, Cy Young. I guess I'll go first here. I hate to take so many like favorites to win awards, but this is probably the easy and another easy pick. It's DeGrom. I mean, he's been the best pitcher in baseball since Kershaw fell off. Probably it probably went from straight from Kershaw to DeGrom, at least in the regular season. Um, he's just dominant. He's objectively the best pitcher in baseball. There's not too many other candidates that I'd be super confident in picking. I'm sure like Walker Bueller, you Darvish are probably picks you could go with. If you wanted to pick like, you could pick like a Trevor Bauer but I mean, I just can't. DeGrom's the best pitcher in baseball. There's no reason for that to stop. There's no reason for him not to be. So in my mind, the only reason he won't win NL Cy Young is if basically he gets injured and misses a bunch of games. Maybe he gets unlucky with COVID restrictions and he has to miss like a half a season or a quarter of a season, and that prevents him from winning the Cy Young. But anything other than that, and he probably takes home this award.
Yeah, I'm going with DeGrom too. It's kind of like what you said. He's clearly the best pitcher in baseball. He has been for the last 4 years, basically 3 years. And I mean, I'd like to choose someone else, but it's just so overwhelming that he's the clear favorite. He's the best pitcher in baseball, like I said. It's hard not to choose him. Obviously, the Mets team got better, so you'd hope run support would favor him. As years past, it just hasn't. So maybe he gets more wins, which again, it doesn't really matter in Cy Young, but it does help if if you're a 20 game winner and you have an ERA like DeGrom, which could easily be under 2, which he's shown in the past. So if I had to choose someone else though, I'd probably choose Luis Castillo from the Reds. And I know there's other guys like maybe a Bueller. He usually starts off pretty slow to seasons. And I mean, they were in the World Series coming off a short season, so they may want to limit his innings a little bit. So that may be a better pick in other years, but probably not this year. But I think Castillo is not a bad second pick because I mean, last year he was really good. Even the year before that also. The only problem is his team is just going to be really bad. So, it's hard to win Cy Young when you're on a team that wins, 70, 75 games. It's just tough to do that. While the Mets are most likely going to win 85 plus games, 90 plus games. So I think if there wasn't a DeGrom, I think I'd pick Castillo, but there's a DeGrom. So yeah, definitely. He's going to be Cy Young.
NL Rookie of the Year. I guess I'll go first. I'm gonna go with the Pirates guy. I don't even know how to say his first name. I think it's Brian
Brian.
Hayes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the narrative, well, not the narrative, but I think logistically it makes sense because the Pirates might be the worst team in baseball, if not their top five or bottom five team in baseball, I guess. He's gonna see the field as much as he can. He's probably going to be the only bright spot on the team or one of the only bright spots. So I think it'll make sense. He'll be able to shine in Pittsburgh. He'll be able to be one of the only, good things coming out of this season. He's already hit a home run today. So maybe that's kind of cheating, but I think he's the favorite regardless. And again, with the Rookie of the Years, it's so hard to predict. I mean, it could really be anybody. But yeah, I'll go with Brian Hayes as my pick.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Brian Hayes too. He last year he was he was their best player on the Pirates. You're right; they're gonna be a bad team, but for winning Rookie of the Year, it doesn't matter what your team's record is. Um, I'd like to go with someone else just because he is the favorite based on the year he had last year, and then he's probably their best player on again this year for the Pirates. So if I had to choose someone else, I'd probably go with Ian Anderson at the Braves. He came up last season and he was pretty effective, and then in the playoffs he was also pretty good. I know he was a top prospect, or I guess he was a top prospect, obviously. So I think this year with their pitching staff, which is somewhat questionable for the Braves, I think he could be a really good pitcher this year and obviously for the future, but just talking about this season, I think he'd be a good second option. And I really wouldn't be surprised if he did win Rookie of the Year. But like you said, it's so unpredictable because someone could get hot for 2 months and then they could win Rookie of the Year. But I guess I'd have to go with Brian Hayes if I had to choose.
Yeah. And our last award, NL Manager of the Year. I'll let you go first on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this seems. I don't know if it's obvious. At least for me, it is. I'm gonna go with Chase Tingler, the Padres. They're the most exciting team, at least from this past offseason. Obviously, signing Tatis, getting Snell, Darvish, getting some other guys on their team. Also, just having the team that they had last season where they made the playoffs. So I think they'll be. I mean, if they didn't have the Dodgers in their division, they'd most likely win that division. But even still, they'll probably easily win 90 plus games, maybe even 95. So I think it's going to be him. I mean, you can't really go with Dave Roberts just because obviously the Dodgers, just because they almost always win 100 games. So it's kind of tough to choose the same guy when they're basically meeting expectations every single year. But I don't know. I think Jay Stingler he may be the favorite. I don't know, but I think that he'll probably win Manager of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was between Tingler and Roberts for me, and the only reason I'm going to go with Roberts, and I think the reason I'm going to is just because it might be the safest pick. I mean, they're going to win their division, obviously. If I'm betting on Tingler, I mean, I'm betting on the fact that the Padres are going to, I mean, be second in the division, if not win it, and probably be close to maybe 95 wins, 100 wins, and I think that's probably what's going to happen. But I think Roberts is kind of just like Roberts is the pick if no other NL manager like sticks out. And if that's the case, Roberts probably wins it because the Dodgers are going to win 100 games unless, again, something completely just weird, messed up happens. They're going to win 100 games. They may even win more. I mean, they've only gotten better since last season. It's almost like the Buccaneers, except imagine the Buccaneers were the 1 seed in the NFC. I mean, they've only gotten better. They were pretty much completely dominant. The only scare they had was probably against the Braves. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go with Roberts. It's the safe pick, but again, if nobody sticks out in the NL and the Dodgers can win 105 games, maybe even get 110 games, 110 wins, I mean, they could threaten that all time. I forget. I think it's the Mariners that have the record for the most games won in a
116.
season. 116.
Yeah.
I mean, if they could threaten that, then I think Roberts is a big candidate for Manager of the Year. I don't even love Roberts as a manager. Like, I mean, yeah, he won the World Series last year, but don't forget the fact that that was kind of a COVID year. Not that I'm taking the World Series away from them, even though I'd love to, but um, don't forget that that was a COVID season, and that again, I mean, you don't have to be the best manager in baseball to win it all. I mean, it's not the manager. To me, it's still not as important as obviously like a coach in football, and not even close. I mean, I think the MLB is a players' league, just like the NBA. Maybe not as much as the NBA, but again, I mean, still, I think Roberts could easily win Manager of the Year, so I think he's like my safe pick. So I'll go with Roberts.
Yeah. So I guess recap. American League. So MVP, I have Mike Trout. Cy Young, I have Lucas Giolito. Rookie of the Year, I have Randy Arozarena. And Manager of the Year, I have Charlie Montoyo.
Yeah, I've got Trout for MVP. I've got Cole for Cy Young. Rookie of the Year, I've got Rosarena, and then Manager of the Year, I went with Aaron Boone.
And then for the National League, I have Juan Soto as MVP. Jacob DeGrom, NL Cy Young. Brian Hayes, Rookie of the Year. And then for Manager of the Year, Jace Tingler.
I had I had the exact same thing except for manager. So I had Soto MVP, DeGrom Cy Young, Hayes as the Rookie of the Year, and then Roberts as my Manager of the Year.
Yeah. And I guess one last thing that we could do that you mentioned, the Francisco Lindor contract extension. It was announced last night, late last night. It was 10 years, 341 million, which makes him the highest paid shortstop by 1 million. Based on what Tatis got, he had 340 million. So Lindor has 341 million. And I mean, he came up with a deadline of opening day as to when to get a deal done. They got it done the night before opening day when it seemed like they weren't going to get one done. It seemed like they were like $50 million apart. So they got it done. He's going to be a Met. I think it kicks in after this season. So he'll be a Met till what, 2032, I guess it is. So I guess what do you think of the contract, the money, the years, everything like that?
I mean, Lindor had clearly a lot of leverage in the deal. I mean, it was when you trade for somebody like Lindor, it was basically you're trading for him knowing that you're going to have to sign him to an extension long term, because the Indians didn't want to. So it's not a surprising deal for me. I know that it might not have seemed like it was going to get done, but I knew for a fact the Mets. I mean, he wouldn't have just like. I was expecting a deal at some point. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I like the deal too. I think it's around what I would have expected to be the highest paid shortstop, but not by a lot. Um, I mean, he probably is a top 2 or 3 shortstop in baseball, so he's deserving of it. Yeah, it's a tough contract to hate. It's pretty similar to what all these types of players get. The contract's going to be awesome for the team for the first probably 4 or 5 years, and then as it starts to get on later and later, I mean, the last 3 years of the contract probably not going to be great for the Mets, but I mean, it's what you expect going into when you sign the contract in the first place. So I think it's a fine contract.
Yeah, and I heard that there was deferred money in the contract, which isn't that surprising, I guess. So it may not be as bad as it may seem. I mean, he's 27 years old right now. He's had a couple injury issues the last couple seasons, but it's nothing major. But definitely with a shortstop, with his range and his ability and everything like that. And I know it's been lower leg issues, so that's not a good sign. But he's still only 27, so you're right. Probably the first 4, 5, 6 years of this contract, it's going to be really good. He is a top 3 shortstop in the MLB. He's probably, I mean, if not including pitchers, he's probably a top 10 player in all the MLB. So it's something that needed to be done. Obviously, you're right. When you trade for someone like him and he's going to be a free agent after this season, you need to get a contract done before the season starts just to know that you have him without having to worry over 162 if he's going to stay or he's going to leave. And even with the class of shortstops for this next free agency, I know you have Baez, Seager, Story, Lindor, and Correa. None of them, I guess, obviously not Lindor now, but the rest of those guys hadn't been signed or haven't been signed yet to a contract extension. So if you're going to go into a free agent market with all those shortstops, which some people may say like a Seager may be better, a Story may be better than Lindor. So you don't even know what the money's going to look like because there's just so many options at your position. So for him to get a deal like this, to be the highest paid shortstop, and I think he's the third. Yeah, he's the third highest paid player in the MLB, behind Mookie Betts and Mike Trout. I think it's a really good contract, and for a team like the Mets that hasn't had a player like this, it's probably since like Mike Piazza, I'd say. Maybe I guess David Wright. But I guess Mike Piazza, if someone coming from another team to your team and being your franchise player, I think it's something that needed to be done. And obviously, knowing Mets fans, they love the contract, so I think it's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah, no, I would probably agree with that. But I guess that's it. I will do one more thing, and I'll go first. But I was gonna do one just in general hot take or bold take for the MLB season. It could be anything you want. It could be about the home run derby. It could really be about anything. We'll go first to give you time. I'm gonna go with the Dodgers break the 116 win amount. It hasn't really been something I've thought about too much, but again, I mean, they were clearly, I don't know about clearly, but they were, I mean, at least on paper last year, they were clearly the best team. And I think they've only gotten better adding Bauer, adding others. They're just such a dominant team. I mean, they have David Price opening as a reliever this year, which I think is about as good of a problem as you could have in general. Their rotation is stellar. Their lineup is stellar. Betts is probably right now, people would probably have him as the second best player in the league. And the second part of that bold take is that they're going to not win the World Series. So my take is they're going to break the single season winning record and then not win the World Series.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 116, that's a lot for a team that's coming off a World Series. That's going to be tough. But I mean, I would say that's definitely possible because their team is completely stacked. Their bullpen got better, their starting rotation got better, and then obviously their lineup is amazing. So it's definitely not out of the question. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually did, especially in that division also. So I would say my hot take, I was just trying to think of one kind of like really quick. I'm going to go with Ronald Acuna. He's going to have 50 homers and 40 stolen bases, which I don't think's ever been done in the MLB. I know he was close to being a 40-40 player in 2019, the last full season. He got injured the last couple of games, so he was 3 stolen bases off of having a 40-40 season. I'm going to say he gets a 50-40 season where obviously 50 homers, 40 stolen bases. I don't know if that would actually happen. I think that's almost ridiculous if that really does happen, but I'm going to say he does do that.
All right. Well, I mean, that's it for this episode. March Madness, MLB. I'm excited for the season. I mean, we haven't really had a full season of baseball. I mean, we didn't have it last year, so this is almost a return to normalcy in a way. But yeah, that was it. Appreciate everybody who'll stay to the end. We'll be back Tuesday at noon. And Brandon, anything else to say before we?
No, I mean, that's it. Yeah, we'll be back Tuesday at noon.
All right. Read everything in the description. It's got everything, Clips channel, TikTok, social medias, new stuff. Feel free to read in the description. We'll be back Tuesday at noon.